to discuss the BHP decision and also further fighting over the contentious mining resources rent tax, the Senator from the great mining state of Western Australia, Opposition Assistant Treasurer, Senator Matthias Cormann, speaking to us from Canberra. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be back, Janine.
Now, I've had my rant about BHP. I'm sure you don't agree. Can we have your take on this announcement today?
Well, it's very bad news for South Australia and very bad news for Australia. And I've got something in my ear here. I've got an echo in my ear. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. We can hear you. If you can ignore it, perhaps you could just tell us what you think of this decision.
Well, I mean, it is a bad decision for South Australia. It's a very bad decision for Australia. And BHP has been working for a very long time on this $20 billion project. But of course, what this is a vote of no confidence from BHP in the Gillard government. You can't continue to put more and more lead in our saddlebag. You can't keep adding more taxes, more red tape, and creating all this uncertainty in the context of an uncertain world, undermining our international competitiveness as you go, and not expect that there will be consequences. I mean, it is a terrible day for South Australia, and it's a terrible day for Australia.
Can I get this right? You are blaming the government and the taxes for this decision?
Well, I mean, clearly the investment environment that has been created by the current government doesn't help. I mean, this is a significant project. It is a project that BHP Billiton has been working on for a long time. I went to Olympic Dam myself a number of years ago for a pretty detailed briefing on all of this. They were very keen to get this up. But when you have a situation where governments put in one new tax after the other, the mining tax, the carbon tax, continue to add more red tape, and worst of all, create a constant environment of uncertainty about what's going to be next, then we shouldn't be surprised that at some point in time, big businesses like BHP Billiton are going to say enough is enough.
Well,
we no longer have enough confidence to put $20 billion worth of capital on the line.
I will just quote you what BHP Billiton did actually say. This is totally because of a global slowdown, which obviously is a global slowdown, unforeseen. I think they would agree when you spoke to them. They did want to get it up. Totally the result of a global slowdown, and Marius Kloppers only minutes ago, or an hour or two ago, totally ruled out any domestic regulatory or tax factors having anything to do with it. Are you saying he's not telling the truth?
Well, you wouldn't expect a business like BHP Billiton or any other major business like it to pick a direct fight with the government of the day. But I mean, let me just reiterate again. In the current global context, it is doubly important for us to have a taxation and regulatory environment that is internationally competitive. If you continue to add new multi-billion-dollar taxes on the mining industry, the mining tax, the carbon tax, additional regulation, then there comes a point when there is too much lead in our saddlebag, where we're no longer competitive enough internationally to attract the limited resources that are available globally for investment.
But, Senator, I understand your point that a major global giant company mightn't want to pick a fight with an Australian politician, but Marius Kloppers said the government has been wonderful. He repeated it. Wonderful was the word he used. Now, if he was in any way dissatisfied, why would you go out of your way to call them wonderful?
Well, I'd be very surprised if Marius Kloppers thought the mining tax and the carbon tax and all of the additional red tape were wonderful. I mean, all throughout the debates about the carbon tax, the mining tax, and all of these other new Labour Party taxes, business organisations representing businesses like BHP Billiton and others who feel a bit freer about expressing, saying it the way they see it, have been very critical, have been warning about the impacts that these sorts of taxes, these sorts of additional regulations would have on our international competitiveness.
You come from a mining state. Will you at least concede? I mean, we've got your point about the lead in the saddlebag and the taxes. Yeah. I mean, I will take Marius Kloppers at it, and I follow the markets as you do. There is a global commodity slowdown. Prices are falling. Surely you're not blaming Julia Gillard for that, and surely other companies will assess on that basis.
Guess what? If you look at all of the things that we have said over the last 2 years, and in fact things that I've said on this program for the last 2 years, commodity prices were always going to moderate. And one of our criticisms of the mining tax was that it was based on an assumption that this mining boom was going to continue forever. This government has taken the mining industry for granted. They thought that they could tax the hell out of it and it wouldn't have an impact. Now the truth of the matter is that when the situation gets more challenging at a global level, it is even more important for Australia to be the most competitive internationally we can be. It is even more important to have stable and predictable government so that we can be an attractive destination to invest.
And I know your plan is to rid us of the carbon tax and the mining tax. So are you saying that a year from now, under an Abbott government, you get rid of the mining and carbon tax? Are you saying that's enough? BHP will miraculously come back with a $20 billion investment? Are you saying on your watch, without a carbon and mining tax, none of these projects will be shelved, given the global condition?
I mean, Janine, it will take a while to repair the damage to our international reputation that has been done by this government. Clearly, I mean, getting rid of the carbon tax and getting rid of the mining tax will be very important steps in restoring that confidence. But of course, what we need to have a government that provides stable and predictable government, a government that provides lower taxes because they actually can afford to provide lower taxes on the basis of less government spending, so that we actually can restore our international competitiveness and can actually focus on growing our economy more strongly again.
Of course, one of the problems on our international competitiveness that he mentioned today was the high cost, the high Australian dollar. Do you not see the irony that we have a high Australian dollar because we have a mining boom and they're making a lot of money and they're spending a lot on these projects before they were shelved? That drove up the cost of the dollar and the cost, didn't it?
Well, Janine, I don't believe we have a mining boom. I mean, I believe that we've got a mining sector that's been performing very well.
Have you had a look out your window in Perth lately?
Well, I believe that we've got a mining sector that's been performing very well in recent years, and we've got a mining industry that's got a lot of potential moving forward. But that potential has been undermined by a federal government here in Canberra that has been taking the mining industry for granted. You can't just continue to hit this important sector with one new tax after the other, with one new
okay, I understand that.
And think it's not going to have any consequences.
I'm still reeling from them not having a mining boom, which for a Western Australian to say that's fascinating, and I'd hate to think what's going to happen.
Colin Barnett says it all the time.
Oh, well, there you go. I'd hate to see what happens to the economy if we really had a mining boom and the skill shortage. But I wanted to pick up on something you said, and while mentioning Colin Barnett, you said you criticised the federal government for taking the industry for granted and for just piling on taxes. We're seeing a debate today, Wayne Swan, warning the states not to up the royalties. Now, I don't want to argue the merits of the mining tax where the government has to.
Why not?
Well, because we know your point on that. But can I ask, what's the difference between a federal government whacking miners, poor miners with taxes, and state governments continuing to up the royalties?
Well, it's a very simple difference, because the increase in royalties in Western Australia and in New South Wales in relation to iron ore and coal will not actually be paid for by those mining companies. That will be paid for by the federal government. And you see, the reason... So
that's the reason they're just going to keep raising the royalties. But if you get rid of the mining tax...
I know you don't want me to... I know you don't want me to keep criticising the mining tax, but the fundamental problem...
Oh, I've given you a good run.
Well, one of the fundamental problems with the mining tax is that it actually does provide an incentive to state and territory governments to lift their royalty rates, because they know that it is going to be paid for by Wayne Swan here out of Canberra.
Simple question.
That is why Wayne Swan is so upset.
Under an Abbott government, if you get rid of the mining tax, what would you do to stop the bad old days where the state governments... Would you tell Colin Barnett, don't pick on the poor miners, we're against raising taxes on them?
Well, if a future Abbott government gets rid of the mining tax, which we will, should we be elected to government, then what will happen again is what has happened in the past. Competitive federalism will come into play, and the state and territory governments will have to think very carefully about what the implications are going to be in terms of attracting investment into their states, of lifting royalties to a particular level. Because of the mining tax, that tension has actually now disappeared out of the system.
All right, I have one quick question, and this is a big call. Just a yes or no answer. I'm assuming the Greens haven't got any chance. They want to push to tighten up, to actually strengthen the current mining tax that was agreed because of the problems you mentioned, but they want it to go the other way. I'm assuming you're not going to support the Greens toughening the mining tax, and I would assume Labor's not going to.
Well, obviously we won't. I'm not so sure about Labor, because clearly the mining tax is not going to raise the revenue they thought it would, and I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't already looking at other resources, which is no doubt one of the other reasons why BHP Billiton would have been concerned about the future prospects of Olympic Dam expansion.
Oh, that's a fascinating one to end on. I'm sure we'll be able to pursue that at some other time. Senator Cormann, thank you for your time again tonight.
Good to be here.
Stay tuned after this break, the fun side of the mining boom with Uncle Clive Palmer and his new best friend James McCulloch.